right, so let's bring this up. 11. Cool. Okay. You guys see this, right? So on your sheet, I think they might be in the same order. I don't know. It might be in a different order. So what I'll do is I'll go through the question. I'll tell you what to look for, right? And then we'll move on from there. So the first question is a document from Karen Ordal, right? So you guys know what that is? You guys see that on your page, right? I think it might be the same question one. Not sure. The question says, which of the following contributed most significantly to the population trend in pre-Columbian Mexico described in the excerpt, right? And here are the choices. So the answer here is D, right? Trade and settlement resulting from maize cultivation. How many people got that right? Right? So the biggest thing is that we didn't really focus a lot on Mexico, right? Remember, I talked about it, I glossed over it. But the main idea I made sure you guys knew was that maize cultivation was the biggest thing that resulted in population growth in not only those areas, but it actually involves the areas of really the United States region. Okay? Good. So let's move on to the next one. It's the same document, just a different question. Which of the following best characterizes the Mississippian societies described in the excerpt? So this one talks about those things. One thing I mentioned in period one is on the AP exam, they always do the same type of questions. They give you a document that usually goes with either 2 to 3 questions, right? One question you will find directly in the document, like answer. We'll find directly in the document, like they'll say in the document, this is the answer, and then you would put that down. One question always gives you you need to understand the situation going on in the document, like the historical context of what's going on. And the third question usually is a cause and effect relationship between what's going on and what happens later on in history, okay? So that's kind of you can kind of see a trend happening. Whenever there's like a 2 question or 3 questions that go with one document, they follow that same trend. So this is one of those questions that you will find directly in the document because it mentions about the Mississippian culture itself. So some characteristics, it would be B, they had a mix of agricultural and hunter-gatherer economies that favor development of permanent villages. How many people got that right? Okay, good. So same document, different question. Which of the following most directly contributed to the advanced development of both pre-Columbian American societies described in the excerpt? Okay, and A is the correct answer. Adaptation to and use of the natural environment for their own benefit. All right, how many people got that one? All right, so that was the big thing that we talked about, especially I think it was topic 1.2, was seeing how all the different native tribes adapted to their environment based on where they lived. Okay, let's move to question 4. So this is it starts off with the second chief, right? The question says, which of the following developments in the 1500s is best illustrated by the excerpt? All right, and the answer is D. Europeans sought new sources of wealth in the Americas. How many people got that one? Good. Generally, in this class, did very well, so most of you probably have got most of these right. The next question, his call for English to learn about, for the English to learn about Native Americans' language, manners, and customs best represents which of the following developments in the 1500s? The answer is D. Native Americans and Europeans partnered for trade. How many people got that one? Okay, good. Next one is now a different document from Crosby. Which of the following developments in the late 1400s and early 1500s is depicted in the excerpt? The answer is D. Europeans undertook voyages across the Atlantic to the Americas in search of new sources of wealth. How many people got that one? Okay. Same document, different question. In the excerpt, Crosby makes which of the following claims about the transmission of old world diseases to the Americas? The answer is A. It was unintended consequence of contact between the New World and the Old World. How many people got that one? Good. All right. Same document, different question. Which of the following describes Crosby's overall argument in the excerpt about the reason for the change in Native American populations after 1492? The answer is B. Native Americans had no immunity to new diseases introduced by Europeans. How many people got that one? Okay. A few questions left. Same document. Which of the following best describes evidence used by Crosby to support his argument about the change in Native American populations after 1492? And the answer is C. Native Americans who were taken to Europe as slaves experienced high mortality rates. How many people got that one? Cool. Different document. This is by Degante. Which of the following best describes the argument made by Degante in the letter? It's B. The Spanish should require less tribute after conquest to avoid Native American depopulation. And we got that one. And there's a lot of kids that did well on this one. All right, different document, new question. In the third paragraph, so focusing on here, right, on this one. Third paragraph of the excerpt, which of the following pieces of evidence does Degante use to support his argument about the Emperor of Spain's obligations to Native Americans? He says A. The Emperor has benefited from the riches acquired in the Americas. How many people got that one? Cool. Same document. This one's one piece of evidence that Degante uses in the excerpt to support his overall argument about the treatment of the people of Mexico is that the Native Americans, or C, did not have enough supplies to support their families. How many people got this one? Cool. Only a few questions left. This one has no documents. Most likely on the AP exam, they'll probably have documents tied to them. Even though usually it surprises me when the College Board gives me these types of questions, because I know that the AP exam is now turned more into almost like a document-based test. Everything's all document-based. So let's just take a look at these. Usually these types of questions are just based on concepts or just direct knowledge of things we learned about. So this one, in which of the following ways did the Spanish impose racial hierarchies in the regions of the Americas that they controlled during the 1500s and 1600s? This is B, right? We talked about the caste system. All right. Next one, what was the major difference between the Spanish encomienda system and the Spanish caste system? Right? You need to know the differences. That's kind of just understanding, knowledge, right? And the answer is D. The encomienda system was based on using Native Americans for forced labor, while the caste system was based on a diverse and racially mixed population. Okay? And the very last one, how were European economic systems in American colonies in the 1500s and 1600s differ from existing economic systems in Europe? The answer is C. Spanish colonists used enslaved Africans to work on plantations. That was not happening in Europe. Okay? Any questions on the quiz itself? Any questions you want me to talk about a little bit that you might have been confused on? Nothing? Okay, cool. So with that being said, let's go into now the discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the clip here, and then we'll go through the chart. So what you should do is have the chart on your screen so that as Heimler is going through parts of this, you can answer some of the questions, and then we'll discuss them together, okay? So if you're looking for the chart, so I made a Word document. So what you could do is one of two things. You can make your own. You can just download that chart to yourself, type in your information, and then upload the file. Or you can use the comment section and make your own chart in the comment section. So it's up to you. Either one is fine by me, okay? So I'll play the video, and then we'll talk about the different parts. And so we have already talked about the Spanish a lot, and we did talk about the French a little bit. But there's not a lot of information about the Dutch, and we'll talk about the Dutch in this unit. But the Dutch is not too much information, but he kind of goes into four major groups: the Spanish, the French, the Dutch, and the English. The English is going to be really 90% of this, not probably 95% of this unit or this period is focused on the English colonies, okay? Because they're going to be the ones that affect us the most. We do have information about all of them, but the English are going to be the most important, all right? So let's play the video. I'll just go to, yep.
Well, hey there, and welcome back to Heimler's History. Now, in this video, we begin Unit 2 of the AP U.S. History curriculum, and the time period we'll be considering is 1607 to 1754. And more to the point, in this video, we're going to be looking at how and why various European colonies developed and expanded in this time period. And I know your brain cows are ready to get milked, so let's get to it. Now, in the last unit, we also dealt with European colonization in the Americas, but we really only focused on Spain because, you know, they were first. But in this unit, the tap of European colonialism colonialism gets opened all the way up, and we see the French and the British and the Dutch come pouring into the Americas as well. But first, let me remind you of what we've already learned about Spanish colonization. So the Spanish sought colonies in the Americas in order to extract wealth, and their primary means of doing so was agriculture and the mining of gold and silver. Now, you didn't think the Spanish got their own sweet bippies dirty doing the work, did you? You're so crazy. No, they subjugated the native population under the encomienda system to do the farming and the mining for them, and when this system failed them, they replaced that labor with forced labor from Africa. Additionally, the Spanish introduced a caste system into the Americas that fundamentally reshaped the society into a series of hierarchical levels based on racial ancestry, and finally, the Spanish were deeply concerned to convert the natives to Christianity through the mission system. And this attempt was met with mixed success. Some natives converted, others converted and simultaneously maintained their indigenous religious practices, and still others flat out revolted against this Western intrusion in events like the Pueblo Revolt. So that's how the Spanish did it, but now let's turn our attention to the French colonial efforts in America, and it wasn't until 1524 that the French had any interest in sailing west and establishing a presence in the Americas, and even then it wasn't really the Americas they were interested in. And mainly they were interested in finding a water route that passed through the Americas, which would give them access to trade in Asia. Now, part of the reason they were slow to colonize the Americas is because they were distracted with their European wars, and they were putting a lot of effort and resources into the systematic persecution of the Protestant Huguenots, so, a lot on their plate. And I guess we should figure out all that American colonization stuff, but, them Protestants ain't gonna persecute themselves. Anyway, not finding a suitable water-based passage through the Americas, the French decided that the Americas might be a good place to squat after all. And so in 1608, Samuel de Champlain established the first permanent French settlement called Quebec. Now, French colonial policies differed from the Spanish. The French had a much greater interest in trade than in conquest, especially the fish and fur trade. And compared to the Spanish and the English, and we'll get to them later, relatively few French colonizers showed up in the Americas. And despite the permanent settlement in Quebec, mostly the French just established trading settlements all throughout North America. So that's what you really need to get into your brain folds about French colonial settlements during this period. It was really about trade for them. And this goal even led some French traders to marry Native American women so that they could have kinship ties to those vast trading networks among the various native peoples. Oh, isn't that what every little girl dreams of? A dashing man, all speaking French, asks for her hand in marriage so that he can have economic ties to her people. I mean, it really is a fairy tale. Anyway, an example of this kind of relationship was the French interactions with the Ojibwe Indians in what is today Canada. Now, the French fostered alliances with this group of natives, and in doing so, cultural exchanges did occur. The Indians benefited the French because they were skilled in the process of preparing beaver pelts for market, and the French benefited the Indians by introducing iron cookware and farming tools, as well as manufactured cloth. Okay, so that's a taste of French colonial settlement. Now let's have a look at how the Dutch did it. And the Dutch, also seeking a water-based passage through the Americas, sent Henry Hudson to find it. Needless to say, he did not find it, but sailing up the river that would later be named for him in this region right here, he went ahead and claimed that portion of the country for the Dutch, and by 1624 that would become a colony called New Amsterdam. Now, the goals of the Dutch were mainly economic, and the establishment of New Amsterdam facilitated these ends. It became a trading hub that attracted other traders and fishermen and farmers. And the Dutch differed from the Spanish in a significant way. Although the Dutch were proudly Protestant, they really had no interest in converting the natives they encountered to their beliefs. For the Dutch, it was all about the hooch. Okay, now let's turn our attention to the British efforts to colonize the Americas, because their efforts are going to be most important for our study of U.S. history. Let's talk first about their motivations to colonize, and chief among their motivations for colonization was economics. The English economy had changed drastically as a result of the Columbian Exchange, and because of England's wars with France and the costly conquest of Ireland, the wealth of the nobles began to diminish. So as a result, they began seeking new economic opportunities elsewhere. But it wasn't just the nobles whose economic lot was worsening, it was the peasantry too. You see, they experienced hardship because their land was disappearing due to the enclosure movement, which took land from everyone held in common and sold it to private parties. And so their motivation was actually similar to the nobles. They wanted new economic opportunities, but in addition, they also needed land. And still other folks were motivated to leave England to pursue religious freedom and improve living conditions, and we're going to talk more about them in another video. And so the English colonizers set out to the Americas as family groups to establish new homes, which of course was far different than the French and the Dutch. Additionally, in the places where the English did land, there was no large empires that could be coerced into working for them. Now, the English did have a season where they peacefully coexisted with the natives they did encounter, but that soon gave way to tension and violence as settlers further encroached on native lands. And in this way, the English were a lot different from the Spanish. Whereas the Spanish subjugated the native populations, the English expelled them. And we'll definitely be talking about that more in another video, because I'm sure that's not going to cause any problems for anybody. That's a joke, isn't it, Dad? Afraid so, but we're going to save it for next time. All right,
so let's talk about the the chart here. Let me just bring it up. Okay. So this it kind of gives you a little summary of all these different things. So what did you guys say for? So we're going to start on the reasons for coming to the New World. Let's start with the French, right? So what were the French motivations? Yeah. Yeah. So first off, right off the bat, all four of them start off with the same reason, right? They all wanted to get access to Asia, right? That was like, remember, that's part of the goal aspect of the 3Gs, right? All of them wanted to get access to Asia. But then when they realized that there's not really a good route to get to Asia going through or going west, they now have different reasonings why. So other than the access to the Silk Road, so you can put that kind of for all four of them, they do want access to the Silk Road. That's the first thing they had motivations to go do. But then when they realize they can't do that, what's their next reasoning for wanting to be there? The French, specifically. So why they stay? Yeah. Good. Yeah, they go on to develop trade. So for all of these, you can say access to the Silk Road. So you can put Silk Road for all of these, right? But then they all kind of change over time, right? When they realize they can't really do that. Because even the English at first was thinking about the Silk Road, but then when they realize you can't do that, they have a whole different aspect as well. But the French, right, developing trade, creating trade outposts throughout the New World. What about the Dutch? What about them? What was the Dutch motivations when they realized they couldn't? They sent Henry Hudson to try to find a route, and he didn't. But then he found a new colony, and what was the whole purpose of that one colony that he found? And we'll talk about that. But what was the whole purpose of them being there? They want to spread Christianity. And what they want to do? Yeah. Yeah, trading hub. Very similar to the French. So you look at those two, the Dutch and the French, they want to create a trading hub, right? So trade. They found New Amsterdam. Right, perfect location for trade. Kind of the mixture of all the different groups, all different traders of the area will meet there to kind of, trade all the different goods. Right. Now let's take a look at the Spanish. Right. What was the reasonings why they stayed? Right. So we already talked about them a lot. What are some things about the Spanish? Their motivations. Yep. Yeah, they wanted gold and silver. You can also even talk about the encomienda system, right? The fact that they were forcing natives to work the land, right? These are all kind of things you can talk about when it comes to the money aspect. And then they also wanted to spread Christianity. So there's two that you can say for them other than the Silk Road aspect. There's the kind of the mining, right? Mining for gold and silver. And the encomienda system, right? And then you can talk about God, right? They want to spread Christianity. Had the second Reconquista. Now, what about the English? Yeah. Yeah, there's actually a lot of them too. Religious freedom, right? That's specifically the colonists themselves, the individuals, the families, right? They want to have religious freedom. They also want to have economic freedom, right? The nobles and the colonists wanted to have economic freedom where they can kind of try to make their own money out in the colonies, right? And the English crown was in the same type of boat. They thought that with losing all this money from the French wars that they were having, they need to try to make a buck, right? So they said, we're going to flood these new colonies with English settlers and have them colonize it for us, and then they would then use it for their own means, using the mercantilist system, okay? So you can say economic freedom and religious freedom. So now the big next one is going to be the interactions with natives, right? And they all kind of are a little bit different in their own way, right? Maybe probably the two of them are going to be very similar. The French, right? What was their interactions with the natives? Yeah. Yeah, we kind of talked about them last time too. They have very good relations with the natives, right? Because when they looked at the natives, they just saw money signs, right? They said, we need to make friends with them in order for us to have a good trade relationship. Okay, and that's like the biggest thing. And they even had a lot of the traders, the merchants, marry into native families in order for them to have these connections. Okay, the Dutch. So first, let's just do here. Is pretty good, right? Just think of trade relationships. The only group that they had some issues with were, remember, the Haitians, right? That was where we started to talk about the Haitian Revolution a little bit down the line. But usually for all the natives within modern-day Canada, were pretty good. They wanted to develop these trade routes, trade connections with all of them. The Dutch, what about them? Doesn't really go too much into the natives with the Dutch, but they're very similar to the French, yeah. Yeah, basically, yeah, you're right. It's basically they kind of just let them be as long as they let them be. Like it's kind of like that mutual respect, and they want to develop the trade, same thing like the French. So you can kind of put the similar answers to the French, maybe not to the same degree of actually marrying into the families, but just really the solid relationship. It wasn't really anything bad. It's really trade relationships for them as well. So now we talk about the Spanish and English. They are like completely different compared to what the French and Dutch do. The Spanish, we already talked about them quite a lot. What's their relationship? How does that go? They buds? Perfect relationship? You know? Yeah. Yeah, you know, you guys are Christian now, but you gotta, you know, mine gold and silver for like, you know, 16-hour days, and hopefully you don't die. You know, they force them into labor, right? This long story short, and then they try to analyze themselves and say, all right, maybe we're treating them too poorly. And there's a large debate that happens because of how bad they were treated, but really just treated horribly. So you could say forced labor, or it would be the big thing you would say here, right? But then they also create, remember, that caste system. They end up intermarriage with a lot of these different native groups in order to try to develop a better standing with them, right? To have more of a trading empire, very similar to what the French did, because they realized that the fur trade is great. So they end up creating a caste system as well, right? So then when you take a look at the English, what was their interaction with the natives? How are they different than the Spanish? What do they do differently? Yeah. They like expelled them from where they were. Yeah, the Spanish first were like, oh, we're just going to force you to work for us. The English were like, no, just get out of the way. Like, just leave. We're going to push you out, right? And that only increased as colonists started to live in those areas. And we'll talk a lot about that, right? That's basically the entire relationship between natives and the colonists is get out of our land type of mentality, right? So they expelled them. They moved them out, right? Right, they get out of the land. They expelled them. So then finally, who did they send to colonize the New World? The Dutch and the French, yet again, are very similar. First off, they didn't send a lot of people, but who did they send? Yeah. Traders, right? Merchants, right? They sent those groups in order to just really develop trade routes, trade relationships with the native people, okay? Okay, so merchants, right? Spanish, who do they send? There's like really two groups I would think of. Yeah. Good, so definitely the missionaries, right? That came second. Who came first? Yeah. Conquistadors. So they sent the soldiers and then the priest, right? The two groups are really they sent. Okay, so those are the two groups. And the English, who did they send? It was a little different. Who did they send? Like everyday people? Yeah, families. They sent families to go there, right? Just the general, the public, right? Just go there, go colonize, live a new life. They wanted to, because understand, England is a very small island compared to a lot of these other nations around them. and they were starting to get overpopulated, right? And on top of that, a lot of people were, trying to, there was a lot of poverty. There's a lot of competition for money going on at the time, and there's also the fact that religious freedom was kind of being infringed. So they said, you know what, maybe it's better if you guys just go colonize, get some of the population problems out of England, and go over there, right? And generally, for the most part, it did work, right? There was a lot of groups that did leave, for religious freedom, for economic freedom. So they sent families to go do that, okay? And so everyday people, okay? Any questions on this? Okay, so that being said, let's jump into no, not that one. This one. Jump into the PowerPoint. It's not going to be a long lecture today. We're just going to go over really the first slide, and then we're going to jump into the 13 colonies worksheet, okay? So let's get started. Okay? So the first thing I always like to talk about when we start period 2 is take a look at the amount of time that's being focused on. From 1607 to, was it 1754? It's a lot of years. It's a lot of years. And you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, this means a lot of content's going to be on the AP. No, it's not. If you take a look at the percentages of what the College Board, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think the first period, so the first unit, is around like 4 to 6% of the exam, which is not a lot, like maybe 1 to 2 questions. This is double the percentage, so you might get like 2 to 4 questions from this period. Now, the interesting thing is that technically, I mean, we're not going to do this. You could skip this unit, and you probably could understand the concepts pretty quickly. All right, so it's not like we're going to spend too much time on this. We'll spend more time than we did on period 1 because there's more material to cover. And this is the only reason why this is an important period for you guys is because it sets the stage for what happens later on, right? To understand why the colonists were so upset about when no taxation without representation, you need to understand that they were already kind of ruling themselves before the English kind of stepped foot into those different colonies. Okay, and we'll go into that, all those different colonies and how they were basically running themselves for a while. And it kind of leads directly right into the French and Indian War, which is really the one of the major causes, or possibly the biggest cause for the revolution. And we'll go into that stuff, but this unit or this period covers not only the founding of these colonies, but it goes into, like I already mentioned, self-government, goes into the Enlightenment a little bit, it goes into kind of the Great Awakening, goes into some of these major ideas that do kind of spark the rebellious side of a lot of these colonists, okay? So before we even jump into a lot of these specific colonies, you have to understand, for the English, there were really 3 different ways in which these colonies were first founded, okay? We'll start with Jamestown in 1607, and we'll end in Georgia in 1733. But each of them really falls between one of the 3 major charters, okay? The first one are corporate colonies. Now, corporate colonies are basically, it's pretty straightforward. It's the idea that these investors basically pull in money to basically start an expedition into the New World, okay? Now, they're granted authority by the British Crown, as in they're allowed to go there, but these, basically all the profits that come from them, majority of it goes to the people that invested the money, and they have to obviously pay a percentage to the monarch, all right? So a lot of these times, these investors form these joint stock companies, right? And they set off on these expeditions, and they land, right? And that's how these corporate colonies start. Then you have the royal colonies, and these are pretty straight. These are even easier to understand. These are colonies directly controlled by the monarch, as in the monarch sent people specifically to take over a certain area, and they rule on the stead of the monarch themselves, right? The monarch sets up who the leader is. And lastly, the proprietary colonies. These are colonies basically given as almost like gifts by the monarch, saying, listen, you can rule this colony, but you rule it under my flag, okay? So it's almost like they're picking somebody to rule for them, right? And that's really the 3 separate ones you should understand. So if you ever see, the joint stock companies, understand it's a corporate colony, right? And that's what they all fall under. Now, this is completely different than how we saw the French and the Spanish set up colonies, because remember, the French are trading, right? They're making trading outposts, and not necessarily flooding these colonies with people, like families from France. They're really just setting them up specifically for trading outposts themselves. And the Spanish had viceroys controlling the certain areas, but the colonies themselves did not really have a lot of, individual freedoms for the people there. Okay, they had a specific system, like the caste system was specifically made for the top end, the peninsulares, to have complete control. However, when you look at the English colonies, they have a sense of a representative style of government that they inherited from the crown. Okay, so they use the idea, and they kind of create their own law systems within these colonies themselves. Okay, and the reason why I put this on the PowerPoint is because it's extremely important that it sets up the idea of self-government. Okay, where the idea that these small colonies can stand up to the British monarch really is crazy to think about during that time period, but it all starts from here. If the British monarch came out just like the Spanish did, with an iron fist, and didn't allow them to have any sort of rights, I guarantee you there was not going to be a single idea of the crown, like allowing us to live on our own, like that we can live without the crown's permission to do what we want, right? But the fact that he didn't do that allowed these people to kind of think of an idea that maybe we don't need the monarch. And the little island all the way out in Europe across the sea, we don't need them. We can deal with this stuff on our own, right? And this starts here, right? So that being said, let's jump into the 13 colonies worksheet. So this is on Schoology. One thing, make sure you do is that when you go to Schoology and you open it on OneDrive, you click on the edits button. I'll show you. Are we good from here? Can I move on? All right. So I'll show you how to do it. Some kids have some issues with editing this. I know that when you first click on the assignment itself, it looks like the first part is a picture, but it's not. I'll show you what I mean. Science. So when you open this on the OneDrive assignments, first off, it takes like some time here. This looks like it's a picture. It's not. It's actually a table I created. So what you have to do is you click on editing and open it in desktop app, right? When you do that, it's going to say, like open it. It should allow you to open it in your desktop app. So this is the app itself. You can click inside of it and type your stuff, right? Because I know that kind of threw some people off, especially in period one that we figured it out. And I'm sure this has been a problem for a lot of people where certain documents don't really look that good, right? So let me bring up, no, not that one. Okay, I'll just do it here. Okay, so the first questions are really pretty easy, and I'll explain. We'll do the first part together, and then that's probably where we finish off. But number one says, notice where Great Britain is located on the map. Why do you think? So first, let's draw that here. Okay. So why do you think original British colonies settled and established colonies along the east coast of the United States? Why do you think they settled there? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, but it's all right because the second part kind of you can answer in the first part, right? So it's simple. Like this is like very, when you first read the question, you're like, yeah, because they can't get to the West Coast. Because when you take a look, right, this is the East Coast. First off, a lot faster to get to the East Coast. And secondly, why would they want to travel? It's very difficult to get to the West Coast anyway. Why would they want to travel basically around the world to get to the West Coast when there's a spot right available for them that's a lot closer? Why would they want to do that? And on top of that, let's just say, well, maybe the West Coast is better for them to do that. Okay, so let's just say they landed in the East Coast. And I'll just do I'll change, no, that's right. So they landed here. they would have to travel across the country to get to the West Coast. That'd be the quickest route if they didn't want to sail across the world. Not only are there like a bunch of different tribes that were out from the East Coast to West Coast. Like, I can't even imagine the number of tribes that were there. You don't know the terrain. You don't know how much resources you need to get there. So these are all questions that are up in the air. You have no clue. So the easiest answer is to say it's a lot shorter, and it allows them to kind of take care of those colonies just in case something bad were to happen. I'm going to jump into the second part of that. It says, according to this image, which ocean is closest to? Atlantic, right? And then why might access to this ocean be important for the economy and longevity of the colonies? And that's kind of asking you to just think for a second, right? Why might this be a good spot for them? Not only for the longevity of the colonies themselves, but for the economy, all the trade that they can kind of pull off, all of the money that they can make. Why is this location good for them? Yeah. Yeah. First off, the distance is a lot easier. So if they want to get goods from the colonies, it's a lot faster, right? And then on top of that, they can now kind of send a lot of the goods to different places that they want to make money off of them. The other thing I was thinking of was if they can control the Atlantic, right? They can try to make some sort of a barrier between the different groups that controlled in the New World to Europe. They can be like the imposer, right? They can be somebody that imposes their will on all these other nations. Because think of it this way. The other major group in this area, I know the French are pretty good there, but the Spanish controlled a lot of this area here. So if they want to get goods from Mexico, right, and bring it to Spain, the British can try to cut them off, right? They can try to cut them off. And in my opinion, I think it's just a lot easier for them to transfer goods or even just make sure those colonies have the resources they need to survive, okay? That would be my opinion. But does anyone else have a different opinion or I want to add to that one about the reason why it's better to have it on the East Coast? Anyone else? Okay. All right. So that's the first part. I think we have 2 minutes left? Or it's a minute? Well, let's just get started on this next part here until the bell rings. So now we're on map number 2. So first off, any questions on map number 1? We're all good here? Good? All right. So let's go to map number 2. So now this looks like map 2 is a political map of North America in 1766, right? So it's a little bit of time passes. Obviously, this is just based on a later date. Okay, and what are some things you notice here? Ah, jeez. Well, you guys have the rest of this for homework, all right? 2 maps and a graph about the geography of the different groups.